Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 114 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. So I had such a great discussion with Kim Murray for this episode. Kim is a widowed parent, and she and I have so much in common. Her husband died of glioblastoma, as did mine, and her kids were 8 and 10 when he was diagnosed, and mine were also 8 and 10. Most importantly, Kim gets real with us in this discussion. She talks about things that people are not willing to talk about, including her older son's struggles, which began a few years after his dad died, and the stories that she was telling herself about her parenting because of his struggles. She also tells us all about the terrific resources she's put together over at her website, which is WPP114, which I encourage you to check out. I hope you enjoy my discussion with Kim Murray. Hey there, you may have heard about my book, Future Widow. What's it about, you ask? Well, first, my young husband started feeling dizzy and stopped making sense. And the next thing I knew, I was a widowed parent, desperately wanting to know how exactly do you raise grieving kids anyway? And that's what Future Widow is about. In the book, which has endorsements from many prominent children's grief experts, my family's story is told as a memoir, but I've explicitly worked in themes about parenting grieving kids to make it broadly applicable, including to those who are becoming widowed parents today. Readers have said it's captivating, that they couldn't put it down, that it's an honest and hopeful read, and that it's a must-read for anyone facing loss. Find Future Widow at futurewidowbook.com. That's futurewidowbook.com. And thank you. My guest today is Kim Murray. Kim is a widow on a quest to make widowhood suck a little less. She offers practical tips and resources for widows managing grief and loss at her website, WPP114.com. She's a widowed parent, and she's joining us today from Commerce Township, Michigan. Kim, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jenny. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you. We've been online friends for a while, so it's fun to see you here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and thanks for coming and doing this today. It's always nice. I was trying to think when we first connected. I suppose it's been a couple of years.
It's been a couple of years. I think so.
We're both in this sad club of glioblastoma widows. Well, widows generally, widowed parents also, and yes, glioblastoma widows. It's some of the parallels are kind of freaky, actually.
Kind of freaky. We have a lot in common.
Yes. So, yay, maybe.
Maybe, I don't
know. Not the things you want to have in common with somebody.
Right.
But all right. Well, hey, let's just jump right in. Before I ask you to tell us a little bit about how you ended up as a widowed parent, I thought I read a piece you wrote recently. It was called "When I Became Everything I Never Wanted to Be: An Identity and Existential Crisis Mixed Together." And I wanted to ask if you don't mind if you would read the passage that starts off that piece for us.
Sure, I can do that. When my husband received a terminal cancer diagnosis, I believed his death would be the hardest thing I'd ever have to deal with. The perfect little life we created ceased to exist the minute the doctor handed my husband a death sentence. All the perfectly constructed blocks of our lives came crashing down with the fury of an imploded building. Buried beneath the rubble of death and devastation lay bits and pieces of our previous existence. I tried rebuilding our fractured identities, but I couldn't fit those pieces into our new lives because they belonged to before. We were different people forced to assume new identities after. My husband's new identity became the dying man. When he died, he became the dead man. But who was I? People think the death part is complicated, but it's not. The challenge is for those who go on living. Within seconds of my husband's last breath, I became everything I never wanted to be.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah. So, wow. Okay. So when he received his terminal diagnosis, you thought his death would be the hardest thing. The challenge is for those who go on living. What a powerful thought.
Well, right. Because you know as well as I do, you get a terminal diagnosis for your husband and you know he's going to die. You don't know when it's going to be. In your case, I think both of our cases, it was around a year or less than a year.
8 months in our case,
8 months.
But yeah, same ballpark.
Same ballpark. So you get this diagnosis, you know your husband's going to die, and you do believe that's going to be the hardest thing to deal with because you, like me, most people aren't prepared for people that young especially a spouse, dying.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought it was going to be the hardest thing. Well, after he died and everything that comes in the aftermath, I think that you realize, at least I did, that the bigger challenge was, how do I go on living without him and all of these new roles and identities I have to assume post death.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you were still alive. I mean,
yes, still alive, still a mom, still had young kids, still had in-laws to not deal with. I love my in-laws, but still had a lot of people to help through this, as well as myself, to help through the death and, again, the devastation. But there was a lot of new roles that I had to take on that I didn't want to be. I took over running my husband's business because he was sick and he couldn't do that. And I did everything. Obviously, everybody who's listening who's a widow knows you have to do everything. So all these new roles I didn't want to be. I became everything I never wanted to be. I didn't want to be a business owner. I didn't want to be a young widow. I didn't want to be a solo mom. I didn't want to be any of those things.
Right. Well, and I want to explore a few of those in a minute, but let's just back up for listeners and hear a little bit about how this all started. I guess, first of all, before your husband got sick, just tell us a little bit about your family, how old your kids were, kind of what was the normal situation.
Yeah, so my kids were, they were 8 and 10 when my husband was diagnosed. So we were doing the normal family with young children things. We had sporting events, we had school activities. We were very busy. We had a lot of community activities. We were very involved in school and community. And he was self-employed, so he was able to be at a lot of the school functions. And he was a coach for my son's baseball team and helped out in the other sports with assistant coaching in the other sports. So we were doing lots of things. And he just started getting kind of confused about some things. Looking back, obviously, looking in the rearview mirror, you can see a lot of what you couldn't see when you're in the moment. But he started getting confused, but we were so busy and things were just seemed to be on such a fast track that I just thought that was what was happening. We just had too much going on.
Yeah.
And he just got sick. He got really, really ill. And I thought he had the flu. We didn't know what was wrong with him. He just basically said he needed to lay down, and he crawled in bed and laid there for 4 days and didn't get up.
Wow.
So I thought he had the flu. We thought he had, but he wouldn't go to the doctor. Men sometimes don't like to go to doctors. So he would not get up and go to the doctor. But we had to take him to the doctor the day that he tried to write his name on a Valentine's Day card for me. And he couldn't write his name. Mm-hmm. So all this time of being sick, and we thought something else was wrong, he could not write his name on the card. And my son, who was 10 at the time, told me that the night before, when my other son and I were out, his dad asked him if the remote control was the shower or where the shower was, and took the remote control with him. It was some weird combination.
Yeah.
Really weird. And my son was like, I'm not sure what's going on. So that next morning, he couldn't write his name on the Valentine's Day card. And I thought, oh, crap.
Yeah.
This is bad, right?
Right.
And I think, you talk about it in your book, like that moment when you're like, his brain is not functioning correctly right now.
Right. And what is going on here?
What's going on? So long story short, we took him to the doctor, and we had to go to the emergency room, and they did a CAT scan and they found a tumor. So the doctor, the neurosurgeon at the hospital, basically has seen glioblastoma before. So he just said to my husband, you have a tumor in your brain and you have 12 to 15 months to live. Wow. So treat each day going forward as a gift. So I remember sitting in the room, and I'm thinking, why is this man talking about death? Like, I don't understand I didn't know what glioblastoma was.
Yeah. Right.
I'd never heard of it before.
Yeah.
It
took me, right?
Right. It took me a couple of days to actually pronounce it correctly. I was so confused about this whole diagnosis. It didn't make any sense, but he was just so matter of fact, like, you're going to die and you need to go get your affairs in order. You hear about that. Like, people say that, you think that like happens in the movies and stuff, but no, it happens in real life. They say, go get your affairs in order. Right.
Right. Wow. I imagine this must've been shocking.
Of course. Yeah. Very shocking. And my kids and I were supposed to leave on vacation the next day to go to my sister's. So this was Valentine's Day in 2013. And I had a party at school that day. and I was supposed to leave for vacation the next day. So I'm trying to process this death sentence that I'm not really processing as a death sentence. But I also have vacation I'm supposed to be getting in my car to go to. Like, now I got to cancel that. Now I have to change these plans. And so everything was just in a complete state of flux, just chaos.
Yeah.
So I called my sister. We canceled that. I sent my mother-in-law to the school to go to the fourth grade Valentine's Day party. And then the next thing I know, they want to rush him into surgery. But we were in a hospital. We were in a hospital that was fine. It was a fine hospital. But we are 45 minutes from the University of Michigan. We're 45 minutes from the U of M hospital. So I said, do not do any surgeries here. I want to transfer him to U of M. So that's what we did. So within that next few days, we got him transferred, and he had his surgery at U of M and his doctor and his care at U of M. Gotcha.
Okay. And for people listening who might be involved in the glioblastoma brain tumor world somehow, I do hear that it's very important to be at a major major hospital that has expertise in brain cancer and neurosurgery.
It is
especially for glioblastoma, but I assume for other things as well.
Yeah, we actually have a couple of really phenomenal hospital places here. We have U of M. We also have the Henry Ford, and I can't think of the other one right now. Isn't that funny? I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, U of M was where I wanted to be for sure. We did a few of the clinical trials at Henry Ford, but definitely needed to be in Ann Arbor. So
gotcha. I can't help but saying here, my dad went to Michigan, so go blue.
Yes. It's a great hospital. Great. I mean, phenomenal hospital. World class hospital. So.
As I was reading some of the various things you've written, and I'll put a link to your blog on Medium in the show notes for people, some of the things jumped out at me. I mean, the parallels you talked about, he was confused how to get to a location he'd been driving to for years or decades. And he was confused about how to put something in the Amazon cart.
Yes.
And this stuff that you're like, what? Like, this shouldn't be hard. Like, what is going on here?
Well, and I didn't even think, because again, putting the present or the gift in the Amazon cart, I just thought, because this was going to be a birthday present for me, I thought maybe he doesn't want to do it. Like, this is, I got to the point where I would sometimes buy my own gifts or buy the kids' gifts, just say, he would say, get whatever you want and just go buy it. Well, on this birthday, for some reason, I didn't want to go buy this camera bag that I wanted. And so I wanted him to do it, but he couldn't do it. So I thought, well, he just must be, faking it because he just doesn't want to. So you tell yourself all kinds of things, right? Sure. You rationalize all of it. And him not being able to get from point A to point B that he'd driven 25 years, I thought was odd. But again, we were busy and there was a lot going on. Right. So maybe that's just, overworked, or he was 10 years older than me. I was 44. He was 54. But then I thought maybe he's got early signs of Alzheimer's or something.
I saw that on your website too. And I had the exact same thought.
Yeah.
And I had just read an article about someone locally who had early onset Alzheimer's. And I remember reading the article and saying, oh my gosh, that's so sad. Like, what a terrible situation. Right. And then this weird stuff started happening. And that was my first thought. Maybe he's got early onset Alzheimer's, right? Because you're trying to look for pieces of information that make sense. Right. And
exactly. You don't know what makes sense and what doesn't. I mean, him not being able to drive from Pontiac to Detroit was odd. It was very odd. But that just went in, one ear and out the other. The thought came in my brain and it left my brain. So that wasn't really something I pursued. Obviously, looking back, I can see he was diagnosed in February of 2013. Looking back now, I can probably go back to 6 months or earlier, prior to that, where I was like, oh, okay.
In hindsight.
Yeah, total hindsight. I remember this, and then this makes sense, and that makes sense. At the time, it didn't faze me.
Right.
Afterward, obviously, I knew that it happened quite a bit sooner.
Yeah. Okay, so he was sick for just about a year.
Yep.
And the doctor told you to get his affairs in order, or told him to get his affairs in order. At this, so you said your kids were 8 and 10 when which is crazy because that's the age my kids were when my husband was diagnosed. Right. I mean, seriously. So can you tell us a little bit about talking to the kids about your husband being sick, and eventually you had to tell them that he was going to die, or the doctors couldn't fix it? Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we discussed it, that, Mark and I discussed it. That was my husband's name, Mark. We discussed it together in the beginning, and we decided together that we would tell the boys that he had a brain tumor. We would tell them he was getting chemo and radiation and all of that. We just felt at that time we could not tell them that he was going to die in the beginning, because we knew we had a 12 to 15 month window. So to be an adult carrying that burden of knowing that tomorrow could be the day he's going to die is super duper heavy. Okay. Like super, super heavy. So we thought, how do we put that on a kid? How do you put on a kid the information that, well, your dad's going to die, by the way, we just don't know when. So in our minds, we felt like it was best to wait for till we got closer to what we considered, was going to be the end that we knew was coming. So for, I don't know, February through probably December, we told them everything that was going on with the procedures, and he had surgery, and again, the chemo and the radiation, all of that. But then his demeanor started to change. So my husband's demeanor started to change, and he became angry one day and then completely fine the next. So it would be, which mark are we going to get on which day? And on his angry days, he would yell a lot, scream a lot. He was very agitated. And then on his clear days, he didn't remember being agitated or angry. So my kids were getting upset because, if their dad's yelling at them for doing something wrong or whatever they were doing, they're taking it personally. And then they're, retaliating or talking back. And I said to my husband on one of his clear days, they weren't all clear days, but on one of his clear days, I said, we need to tell them what's going to happen, because I don't want them to feel bad or guilty after the fact that they said or did something out of anger without knowing the whole story. So in my mind, that was not Mark talking. That was his tumor talking. That was not Mark acting. That was his tumor acting. So I just felt like we had to tell the kids. So in December of that year, we decided to.
And I think you also mentioned, I read somewhere that one of your kids had said something like, Mom, you need a better doctor. They don't seem to be doing a good job here.
Exactly. So that was my older son, and he's very, very common sense. Like, well, if he's not doing the job, you should find somebody who will. And I'm like, yeah, I know. So it just became more and more apparent that they had to know. We had to tell them. So in December of that year, we told them, and the doctor had also, again, Mark was getting more and more confused, and he couldn't tell you what the name of a pen was, or what they, we're in the doctor's office, and the doctor held up a pen. He said, what is this? And Mark said, I don't know. And then he would point to his shoe. Can you tell me what that is? And he would say, I don't understand the question. So we knew, I knew that it was getting close. But again, the clear and coherent days were few and far between. So we decided to, so that was awful. It was absolutely, a horrific, I'm sure you can relate, horrific conversation. And, they didn't know what to make of it either. And then after we told them, they wanted to know how much time their dad had. I don't know. The doctors don't know. Nobody knows. But that fear of, is today the day? Is tomorrow the day? Is next week when we have the birthday party that they're going to the day? Like we're still going on. Life still moves forward. But we have to wonder, when's the day?
And you had holidays coming up, and is it going to be on Christmas Day?
Exactly.
Thanksgiving Day?
His birthday was the day after Christmas. So my older son would say, Mom, do you think he's going to die before his birthday? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of those questions.
Yeah, that's hard. And they were, so then when he died, were they 9 and 11 by then?
They turned 9 and 11 that April.
Okay.
So he died in February, but yeah, they turned 9 and 11. So they were closer to 9 and 11.
Gotcha.
But he was getting worse. His, his cognition was getting worse. Everything was getting worse. But in January of the following year, so in 2014 in January, he fell down the stairs in our house. So the doctor had told me prior to this, the doctor told me he could be suffering seizures. Now, Mark never had seizures. So up until that point, I was not dealing with the seizure aspect, which scared the bejesus out of me. So I'm glad that I didn't have to deal with that, because that's what I was afraid of. Is there a seizure coming? Is there not a seizure coming? Whatever.
Right.
So the doctor said, if he has a seizure, don't call 911. Let it run its course. Don't do anything. Just let it go, because there's nothing you can do at this point. If you call 911, they take him to emergency. There's nothing they can do for him there. He's got a tumor. He's dying. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So if he has a seizure, there's nothing you can do. Fine. Well, then in January, he fell down the stairs. It's like 16 stairs down to our basement.
Oh, wow. Okay?
So my older son heard him fall at night. We'd all gone to bed and he stayed up. My husband stayed up. So my older son came to my room and said, Mom, I think something happened to Dad. So we came downstairs and then we turned on the basement light. We see him lying at the base of the stairs.
Uh-oh.
Breathing very heavy, something I've never heard before, this noise coming out of him.
Huh.
I don't know if he's having a seizure at this point, right? I don't know.
Right.
And I literally 2 days before, the doctor had said to me, if it's a seizure, let it run its course. Okay?
Right.
So my son is like, Mom, you need to call 911. Mom, you need to call 911. I'm like, let me just assess the situation. Let me just see if I don't know what a seizure is. Let me just figure this out. But anyway, he was on his back. So I turned him on his side and I saw blood at the back of his head. And I said, okay, we need to call 911 because this is obviously not just a seizure. So we called 911. They took him into the trauma center, the emergency room. They did a craniotomy on him. He had a acute subdural hematoma. So the doctor said he's going to need months and months of rehabilitation. I said, well, obviously he doesn't have months, and you had to have seen the tumor in his brain when you took half of his skull out, right? So you know that he doesn't have months. And he said, I know, but I had to, let you know that this, we don't know what his cognition is right now. He was paralyzed on his right side.
Oh.
Could not speak, could not swallow, could not talk, could not do anything on his own. He was hooked up to all the machines. He had rectal catheter, the whole 9 yards. And he couldn't say anything to any of us. So I knew that he was paralyzed on the right side. I didn't know what his actual brain function was, but he wasn't talking to us. I think he knew some things. I think he was aware of some things, but it wasn't the same person.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of the end. So when he fell down those stairs, that's when things went from bad to worse.
And then he died a few days or weeks later?
2 weeks later. So he was in the ICU for a week and he was on a ventilator. And I would go to see him every day in the room. And I would just say, do not make me pull this plug on the ventilator. Do not make me pull this plug. So several years earlier, my mom died and she was on a ventilator. We had to make the decision to take her off the ventilator. I did not want to do that again. I said, do not make me pull the plug on this ventilator. So miracle of all miracles, he came off the vent on his own. He got out of ICU. They took him to a regular hospital room, but he was still not okay. He was still dying. He still couldn't eat, drink, swallow, do anything on his own, talk or anything on his own. So we had already created advanced directives. I knew what his wishes were. He did not want to be kept alive by artificial means. And he was technically being kept alive by artificial means.
Yeah.
So I had to make the decision. I didn't have to make the decision to take him off a ventilator, but I had to make the decision to take off the feeding tube. So at some point I had to decide. So he had a week in ICU, a week in the regular hospital, because I just kept going in like, I know what's coming, but I don't want to face it. I don't want to make the decision. I'm hoping some doctor or nurse is going to walk through the door and just say, Kim, you know what? It's time to take him home with hospice. But nobody ever did that. None of them ever did that. The liability issues and all the stuff the hospitals go through, all the stuff the doctors, and they just would come in every day and say, oh, he looks like he's doing better today. He looks good today. I'm thinking, you know as well as I do. There's no getting out of here. But nobody would help me make that decision. Nobody would say, this is the best, most humane thing you can do right now. And so I had to make that decision myself. And I did eventually. It took me several days, but I did eventually decide, because we had advanced directives and I knew what his wishes were. I knew this was not what he wanted. So I decided to take him home with hospice. And the day that I told the nurse that we were going to do this, she said, I am so glad you finally made that decision. That was the best thing that you could do. I said, why didn't you tell me that a couple of days ago? Like, could you not have,
wow.
let me know?
Yeah. Huh.
Because it's a heavy decision. Like, again, 5 years earlier, we didn't want to pull the plug on my mom's ventilator. I don't want to be the one to make a decision when somebody lives or dies.
Right.
You pull that feeding tube out, there's nothing left. He's not getting nourishment,
Right.
But the nurse was very nice. And she said, because we were concerned that like, we're not feeding him, we're starving him. And that's not right. You can't starve somebody. And she said, you're not starving him, you're starving the tumor. Because he's dying. There's nothing, left of him. This tumor is the only thing that you're feeding at this point. So I said, okay, I get it. I can do this.
Yeah.
So we took him home, and he was home for 4 days before he died. But he had his parents here. I was here. The kids were here. He was surrounded by his family in the house that he loved, in the place that he wanted to be. So in the end, I know I did the right decision bringing him home. But it was just a very hard decision to make at the time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah. I hope that people listening can maybe feel a little bit less alone if they're facing similar circumstances or have faced similar circumstances by hearing you share your experience with that. So thank you.
You're welcome. I think people need to be their own advocate and their own advocate for those who can't. Like, again, the advanced directive is I'm his voice when he can't speak.
Right.
So I had to take that role that I signed up for, and my name was on that paper. I had to be his voice. So I'm just saying that sometimes you're not going to get the help you think you need from people, but you have to be your own advocate and your person's advocate too.
Right. Okay, so back to the passage you read to us in the beginning. Now you've brought us up to the time that he's died, and now you got all these new roles that you never asked for.
Yep.
And we could probably have 5 different discussions on 5 different of those roles, over time here, but I'm not sure we can get into all of them today. Let's dive into the role of widowed parent, solo parent, only parent, whatever you want to call it.
I want to call it solo parent because I've made that distinction numerous times.
Right. Well, tell us about that. Why do you like that term?
Because I'm alone, because a solo parent is alone. So the debate between divorced parents and widowed parents, divorced parents are single, widow, solo, that debate of, who's, I don't want to say who's got it worse, but that there actually is not the same. So I do have divorced friends. I know people that were divorced who say, I'm a single parent too, but a single parent who gets every other weekend off and Wednesdays when their kids go with the dad or 2 weeks in the summer, not quite the same as solo. So I make the distinction. I'll be the first to admit it. I am solo, meaning 24/7, 365 days a year.
Right. And when it comes right down to it, I mean, the buck stops with you, right?
Totally.
Yeah, for everything. So, all right. So tell us a little bit. I was reading in one of your pieces, your kids, they had some grief support, family grief support. What kind of stuff like that were you guys able to pursue?
We did a family grief support. So here in the Detroit metro area is a wonderful organization called Sandcastles. So they do family grief support. And a lot of what they do, and they separate kids into age groups too. So it's good. Like the kids can be with kids their own age. And they do a lot of creative activities. So they do a lot of art or music. Things like that, which I think is phenomenal. And they were just young enough that they could do that. We went for 2 years. So at 9 and 11, 2 years later was 11 and 13. So that's 13 was like, not really digging the drawing pictures and banging on the drum. So we ended up wrapping up at 2 years, which was fine. But when they were just starting out younger, it was nice because there was a lot of creative activities they could do. They also separate the adults into their own room. So we had other widowed parents that we could commiserate with. So that was wonderful. And I did try to get some other therapy for my older son. And he just wasn't too hip on talking to a therapist, which I don't want to generalize boys altogether, but let's be honest, I just don't think many boys really want to sit in a room and talk to somebody. We had a male therapist the first few times, and I thought that would be better, but
Yeah.
it just didn't work for him. So anyway, so I tried doing some grief support. I tried doing therapy. I think my older son went through probably 4 different therapists, and nobody really fit the bill. So just kept going on, trying to figure something out.
Yeah. Well, okay. So do you mind sharing with us a little bit about, it sounds like from some of the stuff I've read, your son has struggled quite a bit.
Yes.
And therefore you've had to struggle with figuring out how to support him.
Yes. So again, 9 and 11, when my husband died, from my older son from about 11 to 14, was doing okay in school, was involved in sports. And around 8th grade, I just call it like he went rogue. He went off the rails in 8th grade. So when kids start, let's just say, for those listening, you may or may not know what I'm talking about, but they start off with vapes. They might start off just, smoking a little bit of a vape in middle school because it's, kind of fun to get away with something in middle school. That turns into more things. So starting, in 8th grade, he got caught with a vape, which is completely unacceptable. And there was consequences for that, right? But that went from vaping to marijuana to other drugs to truancy to all the way up to juvenile detention. So we ran the gamut from 14 to basically 18 of constant struggles with trying to figure out what he was doing and why. I mean, I think we knew what he was doing. I think he was self-medicating to handle his grief. But every time I tried to go down a new road to find a way to help this kid, I was just met with brick walls. Every time I would try something new, I'd just, come up against a barrier. It was really difficult. So that was, a really hard time for us when, again, solo parenting, there's nobody here to bounce off anything. Every decision you make is 100% your own. Of course, I have friends and people I can talk to, but when your kid's the one who's doing drugs, when your kid's the one who's getting in trouble, sometimes the other parents don't want their kids around your kid.
Yeah.
That happens too.
Right.
So we had a lot of that too. I'm not sure if I was on the opposite side, I wouldn't want my kid around somebody who was doing what my son was doing. So I understood where they were coming from. But still, it's a very lonely place to be when you are by yourself trying to shepherd your kids through this horrific thing that happened. And they're doing everything in their power to be the poster child for boys who grew up in homes without fathers.
Yeah. Well, so thank you for telling us about this. And I'm wondering if people are listening and if some of this is relating to their situation, their kids' struggles, and they're sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, yes, this is me and my family. Do you have any suggestions or?
I think it happens more often than we're willing to talk about, to be honest with you, because I think let's be real. Do you want to tell people that your kid's a drug addict? Do you want to tell them that he got expelled from school? Do you want to tell them that he's going through the court system? You don't want to tell these things. I told people just because I'm not a very good, I just don't think I should keep everything quiet. I just think people need to know what's going on, and because there's other people dealing with the same thing. Yeah. But a lot of people don't want to. They don't want to break that persona of either a perfect family or you're doing everything the right way or whatever. So yeah, I think there's a lot of that going on that people just don't talk about.
Right. There
is definitely shame involved. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I felt like everything he was doing was a direct result of my parenting. I was failing on an epic level because my kid smoked pot and he got expelled from school. And he went through a drug program in the court, the courthouse. I must have done something seriously wrong. So there's a lot of shame involved. So if you're not willing to share with other people, what's going on, there's no way everybody else thinks everything's fine.
Right. And this stuff is real, and it is happening
it's real
communities and homes everywhere.
It's definitely real. And I have since met other parents who are willing to share, similar stories. And I tell my older son, he's 18 now. And, I tell him now, I said, maybe one day we'll share your story even more, because I just think it's an important thing for other people to know. We are not all perfect, right? I mean, let's be real. No, nobody is. So what you see on social media and the filtered pictures and all this stuff, nobody's like that. So yeah. I just want to let people know I struggled. We suffered immensely. We came out of the other side. We got through it, but man, there were some nights when I thought, this cannot be my reality. Because at the same time, I thought, what would Mark think about this? Like, because people would always ask me, well, do you think he would, your son would be doing this if your husband was still alive? And that used to irritate me so badly, because it was like, really? Like, you think that if he was alive, that everything would magically be different. Like, again, like I'm somehow failing. I can't possibly raise them alone. But if Mark was here, this wouldn't be an issue. It was kind of demeaning. Right.
Yeah. I could, it sounds kind of blaming, like, you can't handle these boys. You're screwing this up somehow.
Exactly. And that's pretty much what it was. You can't handle these boys. Now, every single time my son did something or got in trouble, he had a consequence. I took things away. He couldn't go out with friends. I mean, everything I could possibly think of. So it wasn't like he was just running the streets, right? Like, I was doing everything I possibly could to keep him in line. And it was funny because I think one day, well, more than one day, the police showed up at my front door. But on this one particular day, when the police showed up at my front door, they had to question him about some things. And the one officer took me out on the porch. And he said, I know that you're a widow, and I know that you're raising these boys alone. And I just want you to know that it's really, really important if you check your son's phone records and make sure you look at his pictures and everything that's on his phone. I'm like, been there, done that. Okay. I'm not an imbecile, right? Like, I've done all the parental things, but he's given me all this advice. And I said, just curious how many kids you have. And he said, well, I don't have kids. I said, oh, okay. I thought you were speaking from experience. You're not speaking from experience. Okay. No. I know what I'm doing here. He's not running the streets. I know where he is. I know who he's with. I've got a tracker on his phone, right? All this stuff, but he still did things. Right. He still got in trouble. He still made poor decisions. So again, I did not want to be that poor widow who can't handle her kids. But I thought other people were thinking. But really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what other people think. It really doesn't. They're going to make assumptions and decisions based on whatever they're thinking in their own brains. So it took me a long time to get over that fact of, what are people going to think of me? What are they going to think of me? I'm a terrible parent. But those were the stories I was telling myself. Those were the stories I was telling myself, not necessarily stories that were true.
Right.
But that's what I was telling myself. So yeah, I mean, I did everything I possibly could. I contacted the school. We went through every option at the school. I wanted him to be tested for an IEP. I wanted to go through counseling there. I wanted to do all these things. He didn't qualify for many of the programs because he passed tests. I thought maybe his behavior would be enough to get somebody to intervene. They just didn't. They didn't. So he ended up getting in a fight at school, and they expelled him. So after all that I went through with the principals and the teachers and the counselors, and I literally asked them point blank, I need help. I need somebody to help me with this. I cannot motivate an unmotivated kid who won't do well in school and who gets caught, vaping and smoking on school grounds or whatever. I need help. And I didn't get any.
Wow.
Didn't get any. They ended up expelling him, and I said, okay, message received. Got it.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, that sounds incredibly difficult. And thank you for sharing that with us. I think it's an important topic. And like you said, a lot of things, some things that many people don't want to talk about.
No, they don't.
They want to keep it hidden, or like you said, shame and embarrassment and various things, all tied up in that sort of stuff. So thank you for sharing that. I do want to switch gears because I want to make sure we have time to get to the other big topic with the area. You mentioned before that you have all these new roles, and one of which is running your husband's company.
Yes.
But we don't have time to get to that one today. But the other big thing you're doing in addition to that is this WPP114 website and ecosystem of resources. And I want to make sure people know about that, because I think you've put a tremendous amount of research and what's the word I'm looking for? Well, you've pulled together a tremendous number of resources there. So, well, first of all, WPP114, what does that mean? Why is that the name of the site?
Well, 411 is an information exchange. So back when we had, dial phones and you could dial the time, you could dial whatever on the phone. 411 was information, right? So Widow 411 is an informational resource for widows. So
it's like Googling something, but instead it's on your phone calling and having the
exactly when you used to be able to call 411. It kind of means, it's just like that's just information exchange.
Right. Okay. All right. So information, and I would categorize this ecosystem you put together as tons and tons of information and resources, and as well as reflections and sharing pieces. But as far as the some of the concrete information that you have on there, can you tell us a little bit, like what are some of the topics that you cover, or some of the resources people might expect to find on your site?
Yeah, there's article topics on anything from grief to finances to home maintenance. I mean, again, when you're doing everything on your own, that includes changing air filters in your furnace system and light bulbs, or cleaning out your garbage disposal in your sink, whatever the case is, right? So just anything from money to well-being to home maintenance, just all kinds of different topics. And resources of other places that I can't write about everything. I can't, provide information about everything. So resources to other places too.
Well, and on the financial topic, I think there's a whole host of kind of subtopics, right? There's the Social Security topic.
Tons, yes.
Tell us a little bit about Social Security, like why that's complicated, or what somebody might find if they go digging around for that.
Well, Social Security, especially again with the kids and the parenting young children, obviously kids, if the deceased spouse paid into Social Security, they can get benefits, right? So children receive benefits on their deceased spouse's record, and then the living spouse can get benefits too if you need them. But like when I went to the Social Security interview after the meeting after Mark died, I was told I could get a widow in care benefit because I was caring for children under 16. But if you take the widow in care benefit, you're limited to how much you can earn in income. And so I said, wait a minute. I think at that point, it was like $18,000 a year. So I could get this widow in care benefit, but I couldn't go out and work making more than $18,000 a year. So I said, you know what? Keep your benefit. I'm good. Okay. I'm just going to go to work and support myself and my family. So I think that sometimes it can be complicated as to whether you should take a benefit or not, because if the Social Security Administration is giving you money, shouldn't you take it? Well, not necessarily, not in every situation. If you're not working, if you don't have a job, if you're not working, then it might make sense to do that. But at the same time, your children's benefits are listed under their Social Security number. So there's no tax. Nobody's taxed on their benefits. But when you take a benefit as an adult, there's tax on your benefits. So there's just a little nuances and ways that you can work around that if you know what you're doing. So I did a lot of research into Social Security, and I wanted to know what was going to happen when I go to hit retirement age. So you can take a widow survivor benefit, or you can take your own retirement benefit. You can take one and switch to the other. There's lots of nuances about it. So I think it can be very complicated. And I don't think the Social Security Administration always gives you the right information. They don't. As a matter of fact, I've got several instances where I've talked to people and they haven't. So unless you're educated about it, you could walk in and they could tell you to do the wrong thing or not to do something that would be in your benefit.
Right. That's interesting. I've heard that too. And it kind of shocks me. Right. But
it is shocking.
whether it's different Social Security offices or different people
Yes.
at those offices or whatever, like you might get different answers on the same situation or same question. So I think it's an important point you're making to get up to speed on the topic, educate
Absolutely.
yourself, and learn, and so that you can make the choices that are going to be the most beneficial to you.
Absolutely. And I'm not a big proponent of limiting my income potential. So I tell other widows I work with, listen, if you can go work. There's no sense in you putting a cap on your income just because you might get a couple $100 a month from Social Security. Like, you got to think about it in terms of what's the best benefit.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then the other thing, as far as like the kids' benefits, and so to your point, even so you can be working and earning whatever salary you're earning, and your kids can still get the benefits, like you said. And I think getting, like filing for those right away, not delaying and stuff.
Not delaying. And there's a family maximum benefit that you can receive from Social Security. So let's just say you have 3 kids. If you have, my 2, I think, reach the family maximum. It's a complicated calculation. But anyways, let's say you have 3 kids. Your kids are what their benefit is getting is going to reach that family maximum benefit cap. So if you take a widow, child, and care benefit, you're just taking that cap and spreading it out between 4 instead of 3. And you're paying tax on your portion because you're the adult. Right. Why not take that benefit, keep the kids' benefits coming, let the max happen, and cap out from their benefits, and you're still getting the same amount of money. Right. And you can use that money that you're getting for them to pay your mortgage and your food and your electricity bills, and because you have expenses to raise the children. So. Exactly. And I hear a lot of widows talking about putting money away in savings and whatever for them. That's fine. You can choose how to do it, but it is for the care of your children day to day. That, like you said, includes a mortgage, includes the heat in your house. I think sometimes the widows feel guilty about spending that money on household things, expenses, but that's what it's for. That's why you need to, that's what you should do. I'm not saving, money for my kids. We do our own, I have, different ways of doing it, but it wasn't like I just stacked it all away and then worked till my fingers bled because I was trying to make enough money to support us. It all comes together. It's there for a reason. And as far as other things people can, so on your site, I think you also talk, about insurance and caring for a home and property and paperwork. Actually, talk to us a little bit about paperwork. I think you've got something on like the first, months and year or two. There's like a million paperwork related things. That's what the Ultimate Survival Guide for Widows is. So tell us about that. Yeah, so I created this guide called the Ultimate Survival Guide for Widows because there's so many tasks you need to do after someone dies. And I was lost in paperwork. I had piles on my desk and folders and different lists of things that needed to get done. I knew the financial side of our budget because I was involved in it. I knew how much we had. I knew where everything was. I knew passwords. I knew all of that. If you don't know any of that information and your spouse dies, you are like 1,000% worse off, right? Because you have to get up to speed on all of that. So I would think to myself, as I'm doing all this paperwork, closing accounts, contacting Social Security, contacting credit bureaus, whatever it is I'm doing, I'm thinking, what if you don't know how to do this? How do you even get started? So I just kept notes and lists, and I just put all of that together. It took me probably 3 solid years to put it into some working order, but I just decided to finally do that as a guide for widows. Yeah. So I started off with an ebook, but I changed it to an online course because I think it's a little bit easier to navigate as an online course. So it's probably 9 sections. I think there's 50 modules. It's, over 200 plus pages of information, but there's worksheets and templates and checklists and things for you to use to go through those tasks and to do them, but in a more streamlined way. And I have videos at the beginning of each section too, to kind of tell you what to look for and do a little bit more hand holding that way and make it a little bit more personal too. But for somebody who's just starting out, it's the guide that I wish I had when I was first widowed. I'm a list maker. I do things by lists. So I would go and, search Google and newly widowed, what do I do? Well, it wasn't out there anywhere. There was a lot of, you get the 10-point list from the funeral home. Here's your 10 things to do. And you're like, That's not even begin. Doesn't even begin. So
Right.
that's how that all came about. Me just wanting to help other widows get through what I went through a hell of a lot easier than what it took me to do.
Well, and I think that because I looked through some of the topics that you cover and stuff that people might not even be thinking about. You've got a whole section on social media, right? What do you do with all of the person's social media accounts?
Well, the funny thing is, my husband didn't have any. But I thought, what in the hell do you do if you have? I mean, even like Amazon Prime. What if you had PayPal? I mean, there could be money in a PayPal account. You don't know what's out there. Right. So if you want to close it, that's fine, but you got to make sure you get the money out first.
Right.
And even like with closing credit cards, for instance, there's no reason to keep it open, right? But a lot of credit cards like mine are either travel rewards or points or cash rewards or something. So, I mean, I go through a whole section there. Make sure you check your rewards before you cancel your card. And either transfer them or get them or, use them or do whatever you have to do before. But again, some people don't know that there's such a thing as reward points.
Yeah. Such a good, and a lot of this stuff, it's not like it's an unheard of topic, reward points, but it's just on the million of things that you're trying to keep track of and do. And like to have a list like that where someone has thought about it for you.
Exactly.
Right? And you can feel comfortable that if I work down this list, I'm covering my bases.
You're covering most of the bases. And even with the accounts, credit cards and or bank accounts, I put alerts on my accounts, either my bank accounts or my credit cards, to send me a text or an email when something happens based on my criteria. So for example, if there's an online purchase, I get an email or I get a text. So I can get a lot of text that way because I make a lot of online purchases, but I know what my online purchases are. So when I get the text, I'm like, yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. Yep, that's me. Well, I got one time from Lyft in San Francisco. Well, I'm in Michigan. So I'm certainly not ordering a Lyft in San Francisco, but somebody else was on my credit card. But because I have that alert, I got the text. I put a lock on it was a PNC card. I put a lock on it through the app, right away. And so then nobody could use it. And I ended up canceling it. But these are the things I go through in the guide. Put alerts on your account so that if somebody withdraws, if somebody opens an account in your name, if somebody, uses your credit card online. The alerts, probably one of the best things that I've ever done was getting all of that set up so that I know what's going on with my accounts at all times. And if you don't know that, you wouldn't know to put those alerts on your.
Yeah, terrific. Well, I love the fact that you've thought through all of this for us.
Yes.
Right. And laid it out in a way. I think there are templates and checklists and things to make the process easier. Because as we both know, as everyone listening knows, there's already way too many things on our plates. So there's the whole grief aspect. There's the whole parenting aspect. There's there might be, work and other things like that, and the house and the dogs and and all this paperwork.
And all and it's a lot, I mean, it is a ridiculous amount.
Right.
And you just keep uncovering new things you have to take care of.
I'm still getting some mail sometimes in his name.
I know. I do too. Well, one of the things I have in the guide is to make friends with your local banker. Okay. And everything's online now. Everything's through your phone. We don't consider actually going in face to face and talking to people much anymore. Right. And so I say in there, make friends with your local banker, because I go in to the PNC branch by me, not all the time. I go through the drive-through too, but I do go in, and they know me by name. I know them because I have my business account there and personal. But because I took over Mark's business, I still get checks from the IRS in his name. I have changed the business name to me. I have done all the things, and I still get checks in his name.
And then what do you do?
7 years. So I go into the bank and they cash it for me because they know me. They know me. They know my story. I have my account there. They know. So my point is, you have to have face-to-face relationships with people like that. That's an important one. A banker is an important one because they can help you or they cannot help you. So these are the kinds of little tips that I put in the guide too, because maybe you don't think it's important. It is important because you probably will get something in your husband's name, probably a check or something in your husband's name.
That reminds me, I need to pay my property taxes here in the next few days, and the property tax bill still has both of our names on it, even though I retitled the house in just my name.
Right.
And, the stuff was filed with the county to do the title search and the blah, blah. And I don't remember the details, but like the county knows that it's just in my name. And yet the county is sending the property tax bill in both of our names, which isn't, I guess, causing me a problem because I just write the check and mail it.
Right.
But it's just one of those things, right? And it's the loose ends that need to be tied up.
They do. And I do provide instructions on how to keep track of everything too. And send certain copies certified mail and keep your receipt and put it in the binder and do all this, because I knew back when I was doing this, I would do something like you said, I'd change a name or whatever. I didn't necessarily keep track of it like I'm explaining to do in my guide, because I learned the hard way. That I go back and be like, where is that? Dang it, where's that sheet? I know I did this and I can't find it. So in this guide now, I'm like, get yourself a binder, tab dividers, do this, put this in this section, so that you can flip back through and go, yep, I contacted property tax on this day, sent certified, did this, have a copy of it. When you have all that in a binder, you're clear. You're good to go. You know what you did.
Good. I love it. Well, so it sounds like, and it's called, what is the guide called again?
The Ultimate Survival Guide for Widows.
Gotcha. Okay. And that's something that you're selling.
Yep.
And in addition, your website has a ton of information, articles, posts, lists, free resources on a bazillion different topics, all under this Widow 411 umbrella of information that would be handy and helpful and necessary, really, for people to sort through all of this stuff that all of a sudden you need to know and do. And like you said in the beginning, you got all these roles that you didn't want or expect. And I think the information you put together will help with a bunch of those roles, right? A bunch of those new things that people find themselves needing to do, they never wanted to do, never expected to do.
Didn't sign up for. But you can go to the website and pick and choose. So you can search by blog category and you can kind of see what, applies to you.
Right.
Check out all of it or just see what applies to you.
Yeah. Good. I love it. Good. Gosh, we could probably keep talking about this all day because I know there's a wealth of resources on there, but I think people have gotten a good idea and I hope they'll go over, and I'll put a link in the show notes, of course, and people can go and take a look at the deep dive course as well as all the other information you've collected. So let's wrap up here. I always like to ask my guests at the end, if you could say one thing to newly widowed parents, what would you say to them? Leave us with some parting thoughts here.
What I think I was talking about before with the shame with my kid and the trouble that he was getting and the things that were happening in my family, that I thought I was the only one. I guess my, parting thoughts for widowed parents would be, you're not the only one. Suffering from whatever it is you think you're the only one suffering from, you're not. Now, I don't know what is the easiest way to get in touch with those other people who are in the same boat you are. Maybe the grief support groups, maybe it's podcasts like yours, maybe it's websites, but just continue to seek out those like-minded people because they're out there. And they're suffering in silence probably too. So share your stories and you'll find more people come forward with their stories too.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I think that's a great place to end. So my guest today is Kim Murray, widowed parent, founder of Widow 411. So Kim, where can listeners find you, find your website, and find your ultimate survival guide if they're interested in learning more about your work?
Everything's on Widow 411. So it's www.widow411.com. There's a products category in the menu, and that will link you to all the products that I have available for sale. And I'm on most social media platforms, and the handle is @Widow411. So you can find me pretty much anywhere on the social too.
All right. Terrific. Well, I'll put the links in the show notes for that. I encourage people to look you up and learn from all your collected wisdom. So Kim, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thanks for having me, Jenny. It was good talking to you.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Kim Murray as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 114. And remember to head on over to Kim's website at widow411.com and check out the terrific information she's got there. And if you're finding the Widowed Parent Podcast helpful, please consider supporting the show at buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. That's buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. And do remember to pick up your copy of Future Widow at futurewidowbook.com. And most importantly, reach out after you read it and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear from you. As always, thank you for listening. And until next week, remember, you've got this.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.